Welcome everyone to our discussion of Darkei Gemara. We're really coming to the end of the Sefer, but this is a rather long Siman Yud Dalet. It's very important to know, as we discussed in Sefer Gayon, and also in Derek Tfunos, the logical, the bare bones logical statements and proofs. However, language, every language has ways of communicating ideas, certain stylistic ways of communication. So what one has to be sensitive to when reading a composition, and especially when it comes to the Mishnah and the Gemara, is the style that's being presented. And the language follows certain rules. Now, of course, we can't guarantee that the rules won't be broken because of some other situations, like we said, for memorization. Maybe we'll see things lavdafka, but we do have a set of or a basis of primary rules with which that we'll be able to discern what the Gemara is doing. And there's certain key words that are being used, which are used to flag certain logical concepts. Okay, and when I did this in my little computer game, I tried to take the keywords of the Gemara and just have people at least be aware of what they are. And we made a little game out of that. But here it's much more than a game, it's an explanation. So in this chapter he's explaining Darkei Lashonos Hanog b'Talmud. How does the language, how does the Talmud, what are the operating words that say of the Talmud? Okay, and how does it work? Okay, so let's get to where we left off. Okay, so we have this rule like this. What is the difference between Hachinami Mistavra and Daikanami Dikatane? When the Gemara says this that's being proposed is sensible, makes sense, it's a good svara, or this also is true because we find it in a Mishnah. So those are both types of proofs, but what is the difference between those two types of proofs? And he says like this: Ki hachinami mistavra hu keshemevi raya ledavarav mimakom acher. U mochiach svarato ba'oso davar acher Mishnah Brisa o mi davar acher. Or I don't know, I guess, or davar acher. Okay, anyway, what he's saying here is that when you say hachinami mistavra, it's always an external proof. Okay, an external Mishnah, Brisa, but when the Gemara says Daikanami, hu kesharaya shemevi enu chitzoni. The raya that's going to be brought is not from an external source, rak min ha'inyan atzmo. It's going to be from an internal statement that we're discussing. The Mishnah itself that we're discussing will indicate that what I'm saying is also true. Either min halashon, the language of the specific language being used, or the inyan, or the way it's being expressed, the content is being expressed. Omnam lo yavi hachinam mistavra kesharayhi min hadrush atzmo shehem cholkim. Of course, you can never bring up, if two people are arguing about a pasuk or an idea, you can't bring a proof from the statement itself. You can't say the Torah, I understand the verse this way, and therefore when the Torah said it my way. That's called circular reasoning, right? You can't prove something by what you're trying to prove. If you're trying to say this is what the Torah means, you have to bring a proof that that's what the Torah means. You can't say it's what it means because I say so, and therefore you see that's what the Torah says. That's called circular. Okay, so he warns us about that. You can't say hachinai mistabra You bring a proof from the Drush Atzmo Shem Cholke. Why? She'im kein yeh ma'aracha al hadrush. I think that means it's circular reasoning. Ubir davam ba'atzmo. You just explain the same thing yourself. All you did was give an explanation of the pasuk, and you said that's what it means. You haven't proved anything. You just gave a parish, and you said that's what it means, but you didn't prove that the parish has to be true. And this is when we use that statement. It means from. I have support from what I'm saying from some language in the Mishnah itself, but not because I say that's what it means. There's internal support that the Mishnah must mean that. Okay, let's give this. I brought an example. I hope it's not too long, but at least we'll get a chance to learn some Gemara. Okay. Yeah. Just 1 second. Yeah, so we're going to have to do a little bit of work and get down here, but we're going to get to Hachinam Midisar Midikatani. Okay, let's do this work together.
That's Bava Kama.
So Gemara, Bava Kama, yeah, my favorite Bava Kama. I think someone asked me why I love Bava Kama so much. So I asked them, first of all, it's practical. It's something that I can say something about because I have some idea about reality, whereas when we're doing in Kachim, you have to know all the rules, and there's arguments about the rules, so basically it's a participation sport, whereas at least in Bava Kama I can participate. The other thing is that Bava Kama is quite a good example of many of the processes that we've been learning all the Sfarim. So I like to concentrate on it this way. We don't have to keep going all over the place if we have a small area to deal with, although this we didn't exactly deal with yet, but we'll get into it. Boimine Rav Shmuel Bar Abba mi Ukraina. He's from the Ukraine, I guess. Akronia. Mi Rebbe Abba. Okay, Rebbe Shmuel Bar Abba me Akronia asked Rebbe Abba, what did he ask? Keshehen shamin bishalo hen shamin. We know that you have to do an evaluation of a hezek. When someone damages someone, you just can't say, well, I'll give you a few potatoes for that damage. You have to go to the Beis Din, and they have to evaluate how much the object was worth that was damaged. So now, in that evaluation, do we evaluate the object in terms of the world price or the subjective price of the person? How much is it worth? I'll leave it to Rebbe Yishmael lo tivoy lecha. I don't have my question according to Rebbe Yishmael. The Oma b'nezikin shaminan. Since the evaluation is from a person who was damaged, so then it's obviously we evaluate the value of his property. Oh, we have to decide. I'm sorry. We have to decide here. Remember, when it comes to damages, we said right? If you're going to pay, says Rashi, if you're going to pay someone for damage that you did with land, so the Torah is very makpid that you have to give him the best of your land. So what does it mean, the best of your land? Does it mean subjectively, let's say you're a very poor person, you have 3 grades of very bad land, or you have medium land, poor land. So do you give the best of what you have? Is that what does it mean? That the Nizak has to pay with the best of whatever the best of what he has? Or no? Well, you have to pay according to the best of what the world says. If you have poor land, you have to give him more land because in world prices, your land is not called meitav. So you would have to give them, let's say, 1 acre of meitav could be 10 acres of zivrus. You know, you have to give him whatever you have to give him according to world standards of meitav, not your local standard. Okay, that's what's being asked here. So what standard do you pay your Meitav with? Do you do it the best of what the Nizak has? Or no, he has to pay in world standards, and if he just has bad stuff, he's going to have to give a lot more because he has to pay what the best stuff would be. Okay, so he says, if of course, if Rebbe Shmuel says, there's no question about it, we always evaluate the best according to what the Nizak has. So if he has just medium and poor land, he just gives the medium land, no problem. He doesn't have to make any adjustment. But the question is, according to Rebbe Akiva, the Omer be the Mazik Shaminan. Well, that's very interesting. The Torah says that you have to pay back what you damaged in terms of what the best land that the Mazik has. Okay? You evaluate what's called best. So best is according to what he has. So the Gemara says, Meitav Sedei Omer Achmon L'miyutei Hanizak. When the Torah says that you have to pay the best of your land, Meitav Sedei Meitav Kam Yishalem, is that coming to say not the Nizak's not the best of what the Nizak has, the best of what the Mazik has? Or maybe no, it's not. It also comes to say the world, you don't have to pay world prices, you only have to pay the Mazik's price. So let's get that again. Do you have to just pay what the Mazik has? Whatever, what you have to pay pay him back in terms of what's called best in the Mazik, of the Mazik's fields, or maybe, but not the olam. So I think the pshat is you'd have to pay according to world prices, or no, you pay according to the mazik. So it's going to come like, do you evaluate this land in terms of what's best in the mazik's personal property, or in the world's personal, the world's personal property? You definitely don't pay what's called best in terms of what the Nizak has. But in the Mazik's, the question is, when you say you pay the best of the Mazik's land, do you say what his relative best is? Say only has Baininus and Zibris, so he just gives Baininus. Or no, he has to pay in terms of what the universal best is. And you would have to go out and maybe buy best land if he only has Baininus and Zibris and give it back to the Nizak.
You know what dot is it on, by the way?
Oh, that's a good question. I think Tet. Is it Tes? Okay. And what I did a search in Baba Kama for this Hachinai Mistavra. This is what I came up with. It's a little complicated, but okay. A survey. So, excuse me. So the answer was, Omele said to him, Rachmana Omer Meitav Sedeu, V'ata Marta Bishal Olam Hen Hashamim. It says Meitav Sedeu, he has to give the best of his land, the Mazik's land. So why should you now evaluate it in terms what is the best of the world in the world market? Whatever is best. If he has Baininus and Zibris, he should give the Baininus of his land. He doesn't have to go out and buy Edis of the world. So that was the answer. So now we're going to attack that answer, okay? We say that. A survey. So we say it like this. Ainli ela idis, kulam gova mina idis. Baininus, kulam gova mina baininus, and Zibris, kulam gova mina zibris. Okay, we're talking about a person who has three types of land. He has very good land, idis. He has middle land, Baininus, and he has very cheap land. Okay, and now he has three people coming to collect from him. Okay, he has a Mazik who's supposed to get the Idis land. He has a Baal Chov who always collects from Baininus land, and he has a Ksuba Isha who's chasing after him, trying to get a Ksuba back. She always gets the worst land. Okay, so if all he has is Idis, says the Brisa, so all these three people who are trying to collect their debts, the Nizak, the Baal Chov, and the Ksuvas Isha, they all take from the Edis. If he only has middle land, Baininus, and all three of these debtors come to him, try to collect the land, then they all collect from the middle land. And if all he has is Zibris, they only collect from the worst. What happens in the second scenario? High or low, Idis, Baininus, or Zibris. What happens if it has all three? Okay, that's pretty clear. Then in the Zikin, he pays, the person who he damaged gets the best land, the Balchov gets the middle land, and the woman gets the worst. Okay, let's get to the other combinations. What happens if he has Idis and Baininus, the two extremes? He only has the best, excuse me, not the two extremes. He has two top ones. He doesn't have Zibris. So then it says the person who he damaged gets Idis. Okay, that's his real din. The Kesuvas Isha and the Balchov, they get the Baininus. And this is the case that we're going to be interested in, and I highlighted in blue. What happens if he only has the two worst lands? He has middle land and he has poor land. Now, here it says the person who he damaged and the Balchov get Baininus. Okay, so you see the Balchov always gets Baininus. But the Mazdik, he gets pushed down from his Idis since it doesn't exist. He gets Baininus. And the Ksufasisha gets her din, which is always Zibris. Okay, it says Baba Kamaches. It goes on to the other side of the page. Okay, and then finally, what happens if he has two extremes, Idis and Zibris? So the Nizaki gets his din, which is Idis, and the Balchov and the Isha, they get Zibris. Fine. Okay, that's the quite long brisa. But here's our raya. Katani miha mitziyusa. But we notice the middle case, when he has Baininus and Zibris. What do we say? That the Nizak gets Balchov, Nizikin and the Balchov get the Baininus, because he doesn't have Idis, right? The Kusuvas Isha gets her din, which is Zibris. So here's the raya. V'iyamarta bishalo hen shamim. If you're going to say that we look at what's called best, middle, and worst according to what the person has who's trying to be collected from, Tase Bainis Shalo Idis, let his Baininus be considered Idis, V'yitche Balchov Etzel Zibris, and let the Balchov go down to Zibris. Okay, let's get that. If we're going to say that which is what is being presented, that it's all relative, you go after what's relative to you, whatever you have. So in this case, you had Baininus and Zibris, right? So if it's relative, says the Gemara, Baininus really should be called Idis, because that's all you have. We don't care about what the world calls it. In the world terms, it's called Baininus and Zibris. But according to you, your Baininus, if we're looking at you subjectively, Ma'tav Sedehu Yishalem, pay with whatever is the best in your field, your best is the Baininus. So the Gemara says, look, it should have been that the Baininus, if we're looking at it subjectively, really should be called Idis, and the Mazik should get the Idis, and the Balcho should get pushed down to the Zibris. He shouldn't get Baininus, because now he's getting, if subjective, he's getting Idis subjectively. Is that clear? Is that
yeah.
That's too much? Okay. Basically, subjectively, my Baininus is Idis, so we can't let the Balchov get Idis if it was subjective. So it can't be subjective. When we're talking about Baininus, we're talking about what the world considers Baininus and Zibris and Idis, not what was relative to you, like you wanted to say. So that's the kasha. Okay, that is the kasha. So the Gemara says you're right, but you left out one point here. The story in this case number 4 is not that he just has Baininus and Idis. He actually had, Baininus and Zibris. He actually had Idis, but he sold it. So, in other words, it really was relative. I don't know when he sold it. We have to get into Ian about that. But what they're saying is what really happened is he had idis, so this
At the time
baininess.
at the time he made the loan here, he borrowed the money.
Yeah, what? Excuse me?
At the time he was talking about a borrower, right? At the time
Yeah, let's say when he borrowed the money at the time, the lien was chal, right? Exactly, or exactly. Okay, so when he either borrowed the money or he divorced his wife or he did the damage, at that point, right, he sold it. But he had it. Excuse me, he had it, and then he subsequently sold it. So now you want to come back. So it really is subjective, because right now he only has bainis and zibris, but at the time when the din was chal, he did have it, so it really is subjective. Okay, so it is from machro, and we have another support, siyat, because Reb Chista also says it is from machro. Okay, okay. Now we say like this. Now we're going to make a deal. As we said, means that we're going to learn from an internal, from external brisa, non-internal one. Right? Is that what you said?
Well, that's what Achwiti is going to say from the brisa.
Right, exactly.
Is that what he says over here in...
Yeah, I want to make sure what happened. Maybe raya mimakom acher. You see?
That's exactly right.
Okay. So very good. But as okay. As opposed to daikanami. Baruch Hashem. Okay, I wish I remember. I got so involved in the details. Okay, very good. So now you see he's going to bring a raya from an external text. Okay. Hachinam mistavra midigatani achrisa. From an external text. What does it say externally? Another text says, Bainis Zibris, Nezikin bebainis, and Baal Chov v'kasuva isha b'Zibris. You see, there's another text that says that the Baal Chov gets pushed down to Zibris, right? Kashin Hadadi. This brisa now would contradict the brisa that we just brought. So you're forced to say, so you're forced to say that the brises, in order not to have them conflict, is ours is talking about he had his and sold it, and that one is when he didn't sell it. So they brought a raya from an external source that to the fact that our mission must be talking about that he had it and sold it.
Right. So in other words, the way to bring up the price is by saying if he never had idjus and sold it, meaning he never had idjus, and his baininess is really his idjus, and that's why in that price it says the Baal Chov was collecting from the Ziburis.
Exactly. That's the other's text. And our text, he had it, so it was relative, and he gets the baininess, even though it's the Yiddish. Beautiful.
So theoretically, this is the raya that the price is talking about Mishalahi and Shaman.
Exactly. Very good. Okay. ההבדל שיש בין חסורי מחסרי והכי קטני ובין הכי קומר. What's the difference between, they're both perish dachuks, right? We learned in the Ramchal. To say chasuri mechasri v'haki katani means that there's something missing in the text. Haki kamar also means it's like kolomar, means we're giving an explanation of the text which doesn't follow the simple meaning of the words. So they're both, in Derek Tefuno's terms, called a perish dachuk. So what's the difference between these two perushim which are dachuk? Chasuri mechasri v'haki katani and haki kamar. He says, Ki chasuri mechasre kasher chasa mi hamamar oso inin legamre she'eno lo b'kol v'lo b'poel. When we say chasuri mechasre, it means what you want to say in the Mishnah is not in the words. It's like we just said that there's a whole statement that's missing from the Mishnah. You won't find any remiss to it in the Mishnah, but I'm telling you the Mishnah has what they say a lacuna. It has a missing section, and we're going to put it in. But hachi kamar, which is very dachuk, right? Because it's saying there's no remez. But hachi kamar hu shechasa misham oso inyan she'enu b'poel. It doesn't clearly say it. Aval hu b'koach osoloshin, but it can be understood from the words ve'im hu b'dachuk, even it's b'dachuk. Okay, so hachi kamar is a perish dachuk, which which we have it's just a dachuk explanation, but the words can indicate it. But chasura mechasra means that there's no indication that the text says this. We're going just to take the information and say that the Mishnah has left out a halacha or part of halacha. Okay. Seder. What about the Lashonos? He's going to now tell us what are the key words for ribui and miut. Halashonos hanohegim lavo lerabos olichlol hem zeh haklal kagon. Oh, this is a little bit. Okay. Kagon hakol shochtin or zeh haklal kol she'en kamo chayatriv. I think there's maybe a little bit mixed up with the text. Whenever we say hakol or zeh haklal, those are words that are always ribuis. Okay. Like it says a kol shoch nishitz kashem, the Gemara says hakol asuewa, which is okay, or zeh haklal, which is a repeat of you have a bunch of cases and then you say zeh haklal, okay, which is a general rule which could be understood from all the pratik. So it always comes to be a ribui of another case that's not stated. Now again, that's stylistic. There's no reason why zeh haklal should mean that, but that's a rule that we have since it's extra, so it must come to include. But that's a rule of the stylistic learning. Okay, ukiyotze be'elu. Val zeh omra, whenever the Gemara gets one of those words, it always says lasuye mai. What case it's coming to add? Now, what about the ones that mamayit? Keywords that mamayit. Hanogim lavo lamayit kagon zeh elu devarim o minayin. Oh, minyan, I'm sorry, not minayin. Minyan. Zeh elu devarim o minyan. Okay. Like we saw in Baba Kama, he brings hay, but hay is what the Gemara says on our Mishnah that says Arba Avos Nazikin. The Mishnah on hay says Minyan Olamiyute Mai. So whenever you have a number, it's extraneous because really I could just say Shorba Mavan Hever. I don't have to count up 4. So since I gave a number, the number always comes as a miyut. That's a keyword. So really, once you have this rule, anytime you see a number, you're always going to predict that that question is going to be asked. Okay? Now, he says like this. The third type, so we've had already ribuis, miyuts. Now, Tosefes Bir. Remember the Ramchal. V'hanoim labo l'Tosefes Bir. The key words that are going to tell us that there's not going to be a new case mentioned, but this is going to be an explanation of one of the halachas that we learned before. Hem kagon ketzad o lama devarim dome. Lama hadavadom, I'm sorry. Okay? Ketzad or lama devarim dome. V'yesh l'chalai, and he warns us, im yesh hamashal o hadimyan shemevi im hu yotem bavur avanigla. Very important point. Since the examples brought after the Ketzad or the B'midvar Morim are supposed to be an explanation of what went before, so you check out, think, does it really do that? Does this mashal or dimion really explain something before? Im he yotem mavuar v'nigla. It better be clearer than what was brought. It can't be that you're explaining a unclear thing with an unclear thing. You have to explain a clearer thing, a known to an unknown. So if this is not clear, you have a kasha. You say, wait a minute, this is just unclear as the statement that we're going to teach. Okay. Ki az yitachan loma lama dvarim doma o the only time that they'll say Lamah Davidoma or Ketzad is when they're trying to explain things more clearly. So if they're not doing that, you have a kasha. Okay, they'll never do that. They'll never explain something less clear. They'll never have two unclear statements, an unclear statement to explain another statement.
So he's saying for Tosas Biur, would be a ketzad or lamad davar daimer, but then you have to analyze it as a mashal or a dimyon, which would be a lamad davar daimer. If it is
Exactly.
yos muvor v'nigla, what does it mean yos muvor v'nigla? It's more clear and more.
Yes, than the original statement. Does it really? Is it more clear than the original statement? Right? It's supposed to explain what went before. Right? So that means it has to be. It's supposed to be clear.
Well, obviously. In other words, if I say something, and then typically what we do is then we expand upon it and make it clearer. If I'm not making it clearer, then I can't use the word lamad davar daimer. That's what he's saying. And the word lamad davar daimer would not be applicable. Or ketzad would not be applicable.
Exactly. By definition, those things are supposed to be clearer or clarifications of what went before. If they're not, then you have a kasha. Right?
Right.
But he says, check it out. Don't be a participant and not just a spectator.
Okay.
Learning is not a spectator sport. Okay? That's what he tells us. Okay. Lashon lefikach hilkach. But we have this in Bava Metzia. They make a whole big deal of that. Lefikach, right? The bonim akosel be'emsa. Lefikach. They can't understand how lefikach is a hashlacha, a consequent of what went before, and they can't see how it's a consequent. That's what he tells us. Lashon lefikach o hilkach hem biur hanimshach hamischayev ba'osam hadavorim o me'oso inyan haniskar. Lefikach o hilkach is a beer of the hemshach. That means it explains the consequent that is mischayev, that must be there from the things that were said previously, those previously mentioned. Okay? Vehi hanafkusa v'tachlis, he says. He says, lefikach always is telling us some practical hashlacha, practical consequence of what we went before, or some tachlis, some goals, some new information or that we're going to gain from what went before. Rotz lamar, din v'pri. We're either going to learn some new law or some new idea. Since whenever you see these words, lefikach or hilkach, you have to say to yourself, well, what was the hechrach that this lefikach statement is the consequent of the statement that came before? Okay. Now, maybe we'll stop here. I didn't have the time, and I wanted to because I was so involved in belief. I spent so much time with the Higayon, because you read it, and when it's not organized like I organized it, then you miss the point of what he has to say, unless you're Mr. Ramchan, unless you're very, very sharp, because there's so many details on details on details on details. So I didn't have a chance. What I want to do is to bring more examples here, like this one I remember in Bava Metzia is a big one for lefikach. So this way we can see these words being used in reality. Okay,
right. It really does help when you see the examples.
Exactly. So that's what I believe in. I'm going to go back and I'll just there's many examples of things I would like to bring them just to help us to make that really, really clear. Okay, so we'll stop here.